o'clock on Friday. Not sure if the live stream is making it to Facebook at this moment, but we are here. We are ready. We are live right now. Thank you, everyone, for watching. This is our Feminist Friday happy hour. My name is Sasha Goodfriend. I use she, her pronouns. I am the state president of Mass Now, and this is our second time doing this Feminist Friday happy hour. This is a space for us to connect with some of our favorite feminist friends and hear about what is life like during quarantine as we are in our COVID-19 pandemic. And more importantly, what does the work look like? What does the intersectional feminist movement look like in all of our different personal and political worlds? So I am super happy to have Ellie, my good friend, as my co-host today. Ellie and I know each other from mutual friends that were on last week, for example, from Spark Boston. Ellie's also on Spark Boston. Shout out to the Mayor's Millennial Initiative.
Yeah.
Ellie also works with Generation Citizen, which is one of my favorite organizations that literally teaches civic engagement and how a bill becomes a law to young people. And they've already done really incredible groundbreaking work in Massachusetts by getting civics education as a mandated curriculum requirement in Massachusetts schools, which is huge. And so I'm really happy to have her here as a Mass Now member, as my co-host, to interview / just talk and hang out with our friends Raul Fernandez and Rep. Chynah Tyler today. So before we get to our special guests, Ellie, how are you? What are you up to?
I mean, I'm doing okay. It's kind of weird to answer that question nowadays, right? Like, you can say like you're okay, but like really, like it feels like there's fire out in the world, and you're kind of just like trying to keep safe. But I am okay, relatively speaking. I'm in my home in Dorchester, which is my, low-key my favorite neighborhood in all of Boston, or high-key. And I'm just hanging out, finished a working from home day, and yeah, drinking some wine alone because my partner is at work at Mass General as a COVID nurse, and yeah, hanging in there as much as possible, trying to be positive and also realistic, and checking in on mental health and friends and making sure that we can all keep going or help out when we need to.
Yes, how are you is like the worst question to ask now because it is kind of like a moot point. We are all surviving.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that we're surviving in style. And thank you to Allie, your fiance, for doing her hero work at Mass General. What is it? How is she doing? What's that like day to day living with an essential worker?
Yeah, it is both like very, like, I'm so incredibly proud of her, and obviously we all are so thankful for our healthcare workers, and they're risking their lives every day to save other people's lives, and that's truly, truly wonderful. It's also very honestly nerve-wracking and stressful, and anxiety. I definitely think my anxiety has not been this high in my entire life. But at the same time, it's, she's working, as I said, at MGH on a floor where she has patients who might be COVID positive, but they don't have the test in yet. And so they're kind of just hanging out on that floor until they get their test results, and then they can move to a different floor. She thankfully now, all the hospitals in Massachusetts have PPE, thanks to technology that sanitizes N95 masks, and a lot of work by our elected officials, and a lot of pushing from the people to make sure that our healthcare workers are taken care of. So I feel really thankful for that. I feel really thankful that we're living in Massachusetts where a lot of people really care about our healthcare workers, that we have a ton of hospitals too, and a lot of great ones. So as much as it's daunting, there's a lot of things to be thankful for, at least where I'm standing, and I don't take that for granted. Yeah, and just thank you to her and all her colleagues too.
That's such a great attitude. And yes, thank you, Allie. We love you, Allie. If you're watching, Allie, we are thinking of you, all sending you love. Or if you watch this later, thank you, thank you, thank you. We can't wait to celebrate you and your graduation. I know is this spring, and we'll celebrate your graduation whenever we can.
Yes.
Even if it's separately.
Yeah, that's the other incredible thing about her is that she's literally getting her master's to be a nurse practitioner and trying to fix a pandemic, which is pretty amazing. And we got engaged earlier this month before this all hit, so I think I made the right choice with this one.
For sure, for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. And what's working from home like for you with Generation Citizen, and like what's the work actual like with your students and the bills that they're working on too? Tell me all that good stuff.
Yeah. So if I'm staying on this positive note, I think the culture at Generation Citizen has always been one of like supporting work-life culture, and so we're often granted the opportunity to work from home when we needed to. This transition has been definitely different, as it has for a lot of people, and it like routines are different and everything. But I think we're adjusting relatively well. The other great thing is that now we get to push ourselves to innovate and think about what does remote learning look like? How do we help our teachers be able to meet the continuing demands of districts and state, and also their desires to really help their students continue to get their education? How do we do that in a thoughtful way too, of like not just forcing them to do our curriculum or forcing them to get their projects done, but like really thinking about what do they need right now and how can we make sure that their lives are not more stressful because they have to teach young people when, especially when a lot of our young people don't have technology to work off, or don't have laptops, don't have, internet or Wi-Fi, and thinking about these different things. And especially when students have special like education needs, whether it's like being English language learners or whether it's personal education plans, things like that. It's a lot to think about, but it's also a really great opportunity for us to create those lesson plans. So for example, today I finished the first draft of a lesson plan where we're going to have students be able to analyze a city ordinance. And like you break it down by like what is the format of an ordinance, what is in the title, what is in a chapter, in a section. And I feel really excited about the opportunity to bring that into whatever the educational space looks like right now, and to be able to build off of that moving forward, when one day when we are back on campus. But I've never personally heard of a curriculum where you are literally dissecting what your local elected officials are doing and how they're creating these bills.
Like hot off the press. These are real city ordinances that the city of Boston is putting out, and they're like translating them into real speak of what they can understand. So how is the ordinance going to actually impact their daily life?
Yeah, right. And also like it's like them understanding that like people come together and build, make these ordinances into laws that you then have to abide by, and that it's on various issues, and that you're constantly impacted by what the local government does, whether you know it or not. I think that's a really important piece, as well as, like we should be teaching our students to be able to write and read ordinances, because it's a huge part of their lives. And if we can have, families be able to understand how that works more, and have them be more civically engaged and understand the system, we're going to have a much better democracy moving forward, than, having adults who like the civic engagement gap is so real still. Like there's a lot of things where, you know, I work for Generation Citizen. I'm a very active member of society and very civically engaged and vote every election. And at the same time, I still don't always know every single part of the process. And that's a problem. We should all be super informed, and we should have an education that offers us those opportunities. So I'm excited for that opportunity, and I'm always thinking about how can we make sure that all students, including those that don't have access to technology, are able to do that as well with their families.
I think that's so cool because a big part of my like leadership experience or just real life experience is that I went to Boston University and I studied international relations, which I thought was going to prepare me for being involved in politics or political life. And then when I graduated in 2014, I realized that I didn't know anything about how policy worked on the local level. And in fact, it's the local level that impacts our life the most. So I had to do my own re-education, if you will, after university, in order to learn how the city and state politics works. And it wasn't because I wasn't a good student. Of course, I was a great student, but
of course,
it's not taught. It's not taught to our students, and so then it's not taught throughout the whole pipeline. And so I think it's really great that work is not stopping even while we're not able to be in classes together. I see we have a question from the audience, which is to say, everyone watching, if you have a question anytime, please type it in to this chat box. Also, if you are watching, please like and share with your networks because we want to get this message out. So our question from Samantha Montano is, how are students staying engaged in civics with the elected officials while learning from home? So are they allowed to, are students able to normally talk to their elected officials in the Generation Citizen program? And does that change, I guess, now during COVID?
Yeah, that's a really great question and something that we've been thinking about a lot. But in a typical scenario, when there isn't a pandemic and people are able to be at their schools, with Generation Citizen, we have a research unit where students actually do their research, not just like by Googling like their issue, but actually calling up activists and advocacy organizations and elected officials and surveying their community to figure out like who's doing the work already and what more can they learn about their issue as it pertains to their local community. So they'll be contacting their city council that represents their school, or the advocacy organization that has come to their school multiple times and talked about this topic. And they also have them come in as guest speakers and really have that face-to-face interaction. Because a big piece of it is that our students often don't believe that the work that they're doing is actually going to happen, right? You go to school and you write like this makeup essay and you return it in and you get a grade and that's it. There's no outside world impact. But when our students see that somebody's jumping on the phone and they're actually talking to a human being who's in an elected office position, they're like, whoa, this is real. Like, I'm actually able to engage with them. They actually have to listen to me. I'm a constituent. And that's really, really empowering. So then if we can bring them in, the elected officials and activists, into the classroom, that's even more powerful to have that in-person conversation, to be able to give our students the opportunity to ask the questions that they've had in their minds growing up in their neighborhoods or in their communities. And that has been one of the most powerful parts of our curriculum. Now with the crisis as it is, it's definitely been difficult. We usually have a civics day at the end of each semester, which means that each class presents their project and their issue and what they worked on for the course of the semester at some place like the State House, which is usually where we have it. And it's such an empowering experience for all these young people to come together and see that other young people are also doing the work, that they've been able to achieve amazing things and talk to, the Speaker of the House or like their representative or something like that. we are sad that we no longer get to go to the State House this semester, but we're thinking about ways to have a panel of student leaders talk about the issues that they started to work on, or maybe issues that are now coming up for them as this pandemic is coming about and changing every day. And also inviting some of our elected officials who have been in communication with our classrooms and represent the neighborhoods and the cities that we're in. So hopefully we can have that virtual panel happen and have that interaction, and try to invite as many students as possible, and be inclusive as possible. So hopefully that pans out. We're still working on it, but that's our hope for now.
I love that. I have to say, I did get to go to the State House last year to see all of the students' final presentations from all over the state, and it was really exciting to see them very energized with their groups and have their pitches ready. And as I'm a young person myself, I think when I go to the State House, because I'm 28, and I'm so excited looking at the generation below us, thinking that they're going to be with us by our side, in progressive allyship, I think, when they're literally old enough to vote and to be represented, which leads me to, I think, my last question for you, Ellie, which is that I want you to talk. One of the coolest things I think about Generation Citizen is that it teaches students how to take their idea, which is not necessarily, like, even though it's a new idea, and even if they're young, it's not a bad idea necessarily. Like, even young people can have great ideas that then turn into law. And that was very much my story with the I Am bill, is that it was based on a paper I wrote in grad school, and then on what would menstrual equity look like in Massachusetts. And then a year after I wrote the paper, I had enough confidence to then meet with legislators to talk about what it would look like to turn that into a real bill. And so the Generation Citizen students have already done that successfully with getting civics education passed and mandated in Massachusetts schools. Also thanks in big part to Senate President Emerita Harriet Chandler. And now they're working on a really new, radical, groundbreaking bill that I would love for you to tell us about. I'm going to step out of the square for a brief second while I get more wine because it's happy hour, but keep talking.
Yes.
I'll be right back.
Sounds good. Yeah. So what Sasha was just referring to was a bill. I believe it's called the Empower Act. And this bill would allow municipalities to be able to decide whether 16-year-olds are allowed to vote in their local elections. This has been a movement that has been started for a while now. And young people from across the country, including in San Francisco, in the middle of the country, in Lowell, Massachusetts even, have advocated to ensure that they can vote at the age of 16. And for them, it's really important because a lot of them, especially our lower income people, young people, are working, and that means that they're paying taxes. And that means that they should have the right to decide what happens with those taxes in their local communities that they're constantly impacted by. And they're supporting families, and they're also helping out in a lot of different ways. The other piece is that right now currently we have the voting age at 18, obviously, and that is a very transient time in a young person's life, whether you're graduating high school, or you're trying to figure out the next job opportunity, or you're going to college. You are doing major things with your life and trying to figure out your life. That voting becomes not a priority at all during that time. Whereas when you're 16, you're still in high school, you're still in your local community. There's a lot of things you care about in that local community, and you're going to be more likely to vote because it's very relevant to you at that moment, and your life isn't as transient as it would be at 18. The other piece as well is that now that, especially in Massachusetts, that we have civics education, our young people are even more prepared and knowledgeable and have the skills to really vote in a really thoughtful, intentional way. So I fully believe that 16-year-olds are capable, 17-year-olds are capable of deciding the incredible positive changes and progressive moves that they want in their communities, and really hopeful that the Empower Act passes. We currently have a really cool initiative going on for young people ages 14 to 17. If you really care about lowering the voting age to 16 in your local elections, you can create a cool video, like a TikTok, write an essay, Instagram post, anything artistic, stating why you think it's important to lower the voting age to 16. And you can win some money through our Vote 16 campaign. So I think first place is $300 on a Visa card, second place 200, third place 100, and then I believe like 5 other folks will get $50 gift cards.
You have to be a young person to enter this, just to
I think you do. Yeah.
Okay,
you have
that's
to be
cool. We
14
have young
to
people
17.
following, and you have to. So young is like 18 or younger.
Yeah, so 14 to 17 is what we're doing right now. So if you have a young person in your life who you think is really about this and like loves creating TikToks, definitely encourage them to submit their work and hopefully win some money.
TikTok activism coming to you live from Mass Now's Feminist Friday channel.
Yes.
Thank you, Ellie. I think that's very cool that the Generation Citizen students are working on that. So folks can go to the Generation Citizen website to learn more?
Yep. GenerationCitizen.org, and in that, on our website, you can find the Vote 16 campaign. There's also Vote16.org is another platform where you can find all that information as well.
Awesome. So that reminds me of 2 things that I want to say before I introduce our first special guest for today. One is that one of Mass Now's priority bills this session is the Roe Act, which is about abortion access, and specifically it's for young people to have access to abortion as well, because we know that young people don't need permission to become pregnant, and so they shouldn't need permission then to choose to end a pregnancy if they want to. So young people's access and agency is essential to Mass Now's core values. This session and always. And it also reminds me of 2020 is the centennial anniversary of the 19th Amendment for women having the right to vote, which is really important now more than ever as we think about barriers to voting across our country, both now during the pandemic, but also with voter suppression, and young people voting, I think, has been a part of this whole voting arc that we are looking at now with the centennial anniversary. So I'm glad to have your students leading this work.
Yeah.
And with that, I'm going to introduce our first guest for today's episode, Raul. I'm putting you in the stream now. Raul is someone, oh, here we go. All right, that looks pretty good. And so Raul, I know Raul from when I was in undergrad at Boston University, and Raul worked in student life before he became a professor in the graduate education school, I believe. And we were able to do a lot of really cool work in the undergraduate program, reforming the university to add a rape crisis center, and also to add gender neutral housing. And it's been very cool almost 10 years later now to see, I think, how we're both able to continue this work in our different spheres, and also similar spheres, not that far away from each other. So Raul is a professor at Boston University. I don't know the specific title, so you'll have to tell us. And also a select board member at Brookline. And so I'm really excited, Raul, for you to tell us about what the city, the local response looks like, and also what distance learning looks like. And also, we have to mention right now in the beginning that you and Ellie are wearing the same sweater. And
yes.
Let's show it off right now.
Coordinate.
Shout out to Ayanna Presley.
Mm-hmm. Right. Who's also a supporter of the Empower bill, right? I think Ayanna is on team.
Yeah, and is trying to move the Vote 16 conversation on the federal level too, which is really amazing.
So clearly, we're all in the same family. Raul, how are you?
I'm good. It's good to see you, Ellie. I'm vibing off everything you're talking about right now. We in Brookline, we passed through town meeting 16-year-old voting, but we've got to get permission from the folks at the state house. Obviously, right now they're busy on other things, but we're hoping that that's going to happen. We sent a home rule petition there, and we're not the only ones in Massachusetts that have done that. But we're ready for it. We're ready for young people to have a say. And one of the things that I was framing it when we were having the conversation here is we have to be really careful. You talked about access and agency earlier, Sasha, and we have to be real careful when we deny access to the ballot for certain groups. When we disenfranchise certain groups, we have a really good reason of why we're doing that. And what we came to the conclusion is there's no good reason why 16 and 17-year-olds shouldn't be able to vote in our local elections. And you're right. I'd agree that they should be able to vote in national and state elections too. So hopefully we can get that done.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for adding my pronouns. I had no clue how to do that. I was like, I don't know how you're doing that stuff. And so that's terrific. And so I'm over at BU. I'm the faculty there. I'm an associate dean for equity, diversity, and inclusion. I've been at BU since 2006, so it's been a while. And then a year ago, just about, I was elected as a select board member here in Brookline. And for those that don't know, we have a town form of government in Brookline for our 60,000 residents. And so instead of a mayor, we have a 5-person select board. Instead of a city council, we have a 240-person town meeting. And so we are a very deliberative body over here in Brookline. So that's how we get down.
Very cool. And so what does your work look like now? Both like literally, how are you able to leave your house? What's Brookline like, and what's teaching like, and what bills are you working on the local level? I want to know it all. I'm not sure where to begin. That's what it looks like.
It looked like with this and with the sunglasses and all that. So actually just yesterday, our health director, it was yesterday, maybe the day before, announced that if you're in Brookline and you're out in public, you need to wear a mask. And so we're getting the word out to people. That went into effect today. We're not going to be, ticketing folks right now or even, having police stop people on the street or anything like that, other than to just educate people about the need to stay safe and to try to keep others safe. So I'm staying in as much as possible. I did go out today for like a mental health walk. I just needed to be outside. Not all of us live in homes with backyards and stuff like that. Some of us live in apartments without patios or anything like that. So we need to get outside when we can. I cut my hair now for the 3rd time today.
So lucky.
3rd time since this started, not today.
I was gonna say that explains.
Yeah. I got the lineup okay and everything, but yeah, so
it looks good.
Just doing what we can to make sure that everybody else out there stays safe. Let this thing work its way through our system, at least for now. And then some of the big questions that we're reckoning with is how long is this going to be, and what are we going to do to get everything back up and running, including our great small businesses and nonprofits, and our theater, our bookstore, and all these other great places that are just part of our community. How we're going to get those back up and running, and how we're going to take care of all the people that are impacted by this. So we've been spending most of our time on that. We've got the safety net fund, and one of the things I'm really proud of is that when we sort of really built this thing up, that fund's been there for a while, helping out people who have the least in our community. And what we were able to do is really ramp it up, but also like take a whole community approach to it. So in addition to Brookline residents, that fund is available for our MECO families. It's available to small business owners and employees who may not live in Brookline but work in Brookline. And it's all available to everybody regardless of documentation status. And so we thought that was really important to make sure that whoever needs the help can get the help. And we're getting more calls than ever before with folks that need support for rent, for utilities, for food. We also have our food pantry that has seen, I think, a 5-fold increase in the number of people that are requesting groceries and things like that. And they're doing deliveries, which is something they hadn't done before. So everybody is just doing their part and pitching in. People making masks, people making face shields, things like that for first responders and medical professionals. everybody's doing their part over here to make sure that we all stay safe.
Very good. And so where can people access that fund and request either donate? So is it a fund that people can donate and request from?
Yeah, it's both. If people want to donate, they can go to brooklinecommunity.org. And I feel like I should have this number memorized by now, but it's 617-277-8107. That's right. If you need help, call 617-277-8107. If you can be of help and want to donate to the fund, just go to brooklinecommunity.org and you'll be able to see it there. I was really proud that we were able to contribute some funds as a town, about $175,000 from the town. But I just got some new numbers today. In addition to that amount, another over $200,000 has been raised from private donations, and the word's really starting to get out there about this fund. We weren't sure early on if how long this would last or what the scope and scale and magnitude of this problem was going to be. But now we see. I mean, it's very clear that people are hurting right now, and people are going to be hurting in the long term. It does not go without saying that there are people that have lost their jobs that simply won't get it back when things are reopened. It just won't work like that for so many people. And there are people that are worried about being able to stay in their homes and their apartments. And so the need is really great. So we are constantly, I've got it in my email signature, like give to the safety net fund. I mean, it's a massive need. And I'm really glad that people are stepping up, giving what they can, even if it's a small amount, to try to help other people. That's what we're supposed to do here, I think, I love the conversation earlier that you have with Ellie about about local government and all that kind of stuff. Like that's where it's at. And I would say like government isn't the solution to all of our problems. It needs to be part of the solution, but it's about us stepping up, which is why this whole idea around Generation Citizen and civic engagement is so important. It doesn't work without people. You can't just set it and forget it. Like it requires people to be involved. So I'm here with you.
Yeah, definitely.
Cheers.
Cheers. Amen.
So Raul, how has your day-to-day, obviously as an elected official and professor, your day-to-day was already hella busy before this all even started. How is it different now? Is it a lot every hour, every minute of every day is covered, or how are you handling just the challenge of the constant needs that are coming up and the constant, different situations that are coming up on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I think it's it's the, I think a couple weeks ago I was really at my man, this is I was really feeling it, how hard it was to get this done, because what you've got to do every day is wake up in either job really, and is wake up and make decisions that impact people in directly in their lives. Try your best to communicate what it is that you're doing, but also more importantly than that, even listen to people and hear what it is that they need right now, and then use everything you've got, your experience, your judgment, the facts on the ground, all that kind of stuff, to try to make the best decisions possible, and constantly. So that's one thing that really kept me up, especially when we were thinking about early on whether or not we're going to close schools, what are we going to do about these parks and playgrounds, even now decisions about what are we recommending versus trying to order or mandate, especially for businesses and things like that. Those are not easy decisions, and somebody's got to make them ultimately. So I think that's the toughest part is knowing that a decision needs to be made, that it needs to be made quickly, and that you're responsible for it. And you want to make sure that for me, I'm always thinking about what's going to keep people the safest. And for instance, one example is some folks, even early on, were calling for police enforcement of X, Y, or Z, and my approach has always been police enforcement is a last strategy, not a first strategy. That should be our very last thing we go to, is having the police either ticket people, stop people, find people, those kinds of things. I'm never for it unless it's absolutely necessary. And so sometimes not sometimes, but always having some kind of core to who you are and what you believe is really important to your decision making process. to know like, hey, I'm not sure what the right answer is here, but I know that's not the right answer. And so doing that every single day, and now doing it without like actually being in a room with people, virtually or on the phone and stuff like that. It hasn't been easy, but I think it's really important. And yeah, I think it's remarkable how well we've all adapted to, especially for us. We've got, a lot of people who are engaged in our governance are sort of older and less used to maybe less adapt to technology. People have been like picking it up because they need to, right? Because they want to stay informed and they want to stay engaged and they have something to say and they want us to listen. And so it's been really important for us to take the time and effort to provide information in many different formats. But anyway, all that to say, it's been a challenge, but at the same time, I feel good about where we are right now, and I'm really proud of people like you and I both feeling Ayanna vibes right now, like Ayanna and Elizabeth Warren and so many other folks in this area who are out there like representing for us and fighting for people. I think it's worth it.
I love that. I want to give shout outs to some of our friends who are watching, Casey and Amy. Thank you for watching and sharing the love. Everyone else who's watching right now, please like and share and ask us your questions about what is daily life being a policymaker during a pandemic, being an advocate during a pandemic, just trying to be a good person during the pandemic. What can we do right now? I definitely feel you, Raul, about the whole, I think that as leaders, we do have our own leadership philosophy that we come back to time and time again when there's a crisis that hits. And it is eerie to have to go through that whole method of listening to yourself and your values when you don't have when it's harder to literally see sometimes your constituency. And yet it's also eerie how actually accessible it is to do that with technology too, of people of all ages. So I hope that we're able to use this incentive to organize more intergenerationally across, neighborhoods and regions.
Mm-hmm. Well, too, is that you can sense out there. There was like a sort of exchange on Facebook a day or so ago, and you could sense out there, like in some cases, like how frustrated people are and sometimes they're frustrated by what's happening locally, sometimes maybe more nationally. And one of the keys I think to do in this job is to separate the tone from the idea, because sometimes people will come at you and just say like, "I think you're doing a terrible job," and all those, and if you've been in office more than a month, you've gotten one of these emails, regardless of what you do. But separating the tone from the idea, because in some of those emails where people are the angriest or the most frustrated, sometimes are really good ideas about what we should be doing instead. And being able to, so I used, I've had this happen. I can't say how many times. If somebody sends me the angriest email, and I would send them the a response saying, "Hey, really appreciate you reaching out for your advocacy on this issue. This is great. That idea you mentioned about X, Y, or Z, I'm gonna try to bring that up next time I talk with the rest of the group and see what we can make happen." And then almost invariably, the next email I get is so nice. It's like, "Hey, I really appreciate you listening to me. Didn't even respond." Those kinds of things, and it just, I think you got to have like thick skin when you do this kind of stuff, because people's first response sometimes isn't how you like to see it or hear it, but it doesn't mean that what they're feeling or what they're going through or the frustration that they're dealing with isn't real and isn't valuable, and that you don't need to hear it, because that sometimes is what drives us to action. So I think always the more community engagement we can get, the better, regardless of how it comes our way.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely commend you for that, those sorts of responses, Raul, because, a lot of times when folks come at you really angry, and no matter what the situation is, right, but you get the brunt of it because you are an elected official, but they're coming at it because they're in a place of pain and they really need to be heard, and they really are struggling with trying to survive and trying to make sure that their families and their loved ones are okay and are going to make it through. And so their anger and their frustration is really sadness and just wanting to get help and support. And so we need more elected officials who are able to listen, and more political systems in place who are able to listen and not you know, kind of let go of the tone for a second and really reach in deep and think about what that person is really going through and how we can get them the solutions that they need when they need it as soon as possible.
Right. And this is like policy over platitudes, I say. Like it's easy to say like I care about these people. Yeah, that really sucks what they're dealing with. But when you're in a position to actually shape or at least fight for, like we don't always all have like the opportunity to just push a button and change policy, but we can certainly stand up and fight for it. Then that's what we should be doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I know someone else who understands that very well, and I'm going to bring her into the stream right now. I would like to introduce you to, let me try this one more time. There we go.
Ooh.
I would like to introduce you to Representative Chynah Tyler, also known as my representative for Roxbury. I'm sure there's a more official name for our district, but you're one of my favorite reps in the House for also repping this neighborhood, representing people of your identities and the most marginalized sometimes in the House. And so I want to, first of all, thank you for everything that you do already and also ask you, how are you? Oh, I muted you, but
okay.
I'll mute you. Okay, good. How are you?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Yes. You guys all look so wonderful, and thank you so much for having me. I'm super, super excited to be on and to, engage in conversation and kind of just, do whatever we can to make sure that everybody's feeling safe, but not only safe, but also strong during this time. So, Chynah Tyler, State Representative, 7th Suffolk District, Roxbury, Dorchester, Fenway, Southend, pretty much Boston, and I am here to serve. What have you guys been discussing, or what's the issue topic you guys are on right now?
We've just been talking about everything from adjusting to the new normal, distance learning, and I would love to hear about how you have a daughter, how she's been doing with distance learning. We've been talking about policy on the local level because that's where we have control. So I would love to hear from you about what policy the Massachusetts House is working on, and that's a lot. So we could just start with that.
Yeah, sure. So. To be totally honest with you, there are a ton of different policies that are coming from every different avenue. I mean, education, public safety, public health, elder affairs, you name it. There's policy that someone filed in any one of those given avenues. However, you're talking about shifting from actually being physically in a place where you actually can vote and have fruitful discussion and have hearings, which I know you come to all the time, Sasha. To not seeing each other at all and having to do things over technology. And it's kind of really a very difficult shift, but it's getting done. It's happening, but again, trying to social distance and also get 150 house members in one spot. It's a little hard right now, but we're working on it. So as far as policy is concerned, how we're doing that is that we're just kind of just conversing over phone or through different smaller chat sites like this, Zoom, for example, and trying to figure out how we can address or kind of bring forth fruitful policy. And for me, that's something that is very, very near and dear to my heart because a lot of the things that I feel like I've already been fighting for and a lot of things that you've also brought to my attention through Mass Now are kind of, magnified now that we have a pandemic going on. And so it's not anything new that we haven't been fighting before. It's just kind of heightened and a little bit more magnified. So I'm super, super happy to be on the call. You also asked about changes. I actually became a 3rd grade teacher. My daughter's in the 3rd grade, so I picked up a second job a couple of weeks ago. And it's been very interesting to see, how to pretty much have an 8-year-old all day for 9 hours and trying to get them, to just focus. My daughter's attention span is the kids. They pay attention to you for a couple minutes and then they're home in their comfort zone. So it's not very helpful that it's an innovative environment. It's supposed to be a comfortable environment for them. So it's been very interesting, but I really appreciate it because it's kind of, again, magnifies to me what actually is happening in the classroom. And to me, a lot of the things that I'm learning from her and just her level of engagement with education, I have to take it to a different level. And so she's able to learn on a different level when I'm the teacher because, it's got to get done. There's no lax time, So
definitely
working out. I'm trying to teach an 8-year-old social distancing. Yeah, that's not something that's working out for us really good right now. You can try, they're still babies, you can do is try. And we just got a new puppy too, so that's not helping us. So So yeah, all right.
Yeah, and you have to do all that with a full-time job that you're trying to.
Absolutely. Yeah, and one computer too. One computer, and it's been very interesting. She's using the computer in the morning for class when I need to be using it, and I'm trying to help her hurry up and get off her Zoom call with her classroom so I can use the computer and do my work. So kind of just fighting for time a little bit. I wish I could purchase a computer, but not going to be going out the house anytime soon. So yeah.
That's super fair.
Yeah.
That reminds me, I mean, so many things that we have been working on this whole time are now just like even more, like have a bigger magnifying glass on them. Amy Mahler, I want to give her a shout out. She's asked the same question: which crack has been exposed that can and should be fixed with a policy solution? And two things that are coming top of mind to me. One is a bill that Mass Now is working on is to have campaign funds, PAC funds, be used for childcare.
Yes, that's definitely support, because I don't have a babysitter. Yeah, and it's interesting because that one kind of hits home for me because when I was campaigning, I depended on my family who, my mom and my grandma who are both, seniors. And I mean, again, you can only do so much with a senior and an 8-year-old. Like those are two totally different ends of the spectrum. And my daughter has so much energy, and my grandmother and mother, who are my primary caretakers for my daughter, are much older. So definitely need that type of support there because you want your child to be in a space where, they'll be safe with my family, but you want them to be in a space where they're also like learning too, so that's super, super important for me anyways. I know I have a lot of rep friends that are parents. A lot of them have more than one kid. I only have one, so I can't imagine my rep friends who have, 2 kids. Some of them have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, and I'm like, I don't know how you do it because I'm struggling with my one. So that's a super important bill, and I hope that we see that through.
Well, shout out to all of the parents right now, with or without jobs, just like all the parents right now. You're killing it. Thank you for your service as essential workers for raising our youth. This is, it's real work. And I feel like it's real work that's been undervalued as work for our entire country's, society's, history, really. They just see it as something that should be done anyways. And yet it's work. It's valued. It needs to be paid a living wage. And I hope that people are realizing that now more than ever when we're forced to be in this situation.
Yeah.
Also, I want to give a shout out to Kim. Thanks for joining us, Kim, from Newton. Another issue that I think a crack that has been exposed more that I would love to hear about what the Massachusetts House is working on now is homelessness. So I know that I've been reading that the homelessness are, one, it was hard to test the homeless population, or and one, it's hard to count and get data on the homeless population in general. And then two, once they were able to test the homeless population for COVID, that it was like a third of the homeless population, I think, in Massachusetts tested positive, or maybe even more. And so eviction and stopping evictions is part of that cycle of stopping homelessness. That was already an issue, and I think is now even more of a permanent or a crisis issue. What's happening? Mass Now has endorsed legislation from the Massachusetts Association of Public Health. Lots of our, coalition partners have been talking about trying to get Massachusetts to put a stop on evictions to stop homelessness right now. How is that conversation unfolding in the House? I know you had informal session.
Yes.
I'm not exactly sure what that means also. What does it mean that the House is an informal session?
So usually informal session is kind of, it's formal session, but it's kind of more administrative. It happens usually twice a week on Tuesday, Thursday, so we can kind of just get through all the processes. Because as you can imagine, like a lot of processing has to happen in order to be able to have a bill become a law. So a lot of the time is procedural. And then once a week on Wednesdays, or they can vary, but most of the time it's Wednesdays, we get together as a collective, as 160 reps, and we have formal session where we're actually actively engaging in debating and conversation and kind of just getting together and galvanizing to be able to have a bill become a law or kind of push it through the process. And so right now, because of social distancing, we can't get together as one group. Everything is happening in those two like informal sessions. And so typically we wouldn't be there, but a lot of the times it seems like some folks are showing up to be able to kind of shed light on or to stop or to push forward an initiative that is going through informal session, which doesn't necessarily need a vote or a majority vote a lot of the time. So it could be a really, really good thing, and it could be a really, really bad thing because, again, no vote is required. So talk about like housing. I like to talk about things in a preventative measure. What could we do to prevent situations like this? So as you know, housing is something that's on the top of my to-do list as far as issue areas I'm concerned about. And now this year I'm the vice chair of public health, but I've always saw any of these issues that are historically kind of push back our community as a public health issue because we have a really, really huge income inequality gap here in the city of Boston, not only in the city, in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So you think to yourself, hey, like, why do we have a big income inequality gap? Well, that's because we have a lot of things that, that are in play to get you from being a child or a student or, a minor to be able to become an adult. And a lot of the times our youth aren't prepared to go into adulthood. But that just took time. Sorry, hold on a second. Can you get the dog, please? The dog likes to look at itself in the mirror and bark at itself. It's a situation
that's amazing.
And so, a lot of the times our youth aren't ready to become an adult once they switch over to 18 or whatever age it is into adulthood, or even go on a college campus. Like our youth aren't prepared for that. So, talk about like a housing crisis. So if you have a child that never really understood, economics, never really balanced a bank account, never really wrote a check, doesn't really understand the process of actually how to apply for housing, or doesn't really understand that just because you may have grown up, for example, in Boston your whole life, just because you apply for housing tomorrow, you're not going to get a preference. Kind of just, our kids aren't prepared to be able to navigate systems. They don't really know how to. So a lot of the times, like we have to spend a lot of the time preparing folks to be able to be an adult and to be able to grow up and to kind of maneuver or navigate these systems because they're really, really hard to navigate. And if you're low income, you come from a low income family, the chances of your parents knowing how to navigate that would probably be slim to none. So we have to do everything we can to be able to pour into our next generation, even us as adults and young adults, to be able to learn how to navigate systems. Unless, things like, poor education, not having enough money to be able to become a homeowner, but you're a renter and you're pretty much paying the rent of your landlord. You're like $50 away from moving where you live at because you're on like a steady income, or you don't have access to jobs that can, pay you enough to be able to afford rent. For example, in Roxbury, a one bedroom, almost $2,000. So we just have to do whatever we can to prepare folks to be able to become great adults. And we just really don't have those systems in place right now. And we're working on it, but that's something that I really, really like to focus on. So when you talk about housing, why is there such a high rate of eviction? Well, that's because folks are not making enough money to be able to afford the rent in their communities, and they can't keep up with, the ever rising cost of rent. So that's why we have so much eviction. And once they do get evicted, if they do go to housing court, folks don't really understand that, like, there are systems in play or organizations that in place to be able to help you, prevent you from getting evicted. But a lot of folks, everyday folks, maybe like you or I, or all of us on this call, how do I even access that? Like, where do I even go? Who do I even talk to? So folks just really don't know where to go. So for all the folks that are watching and for everyone out there asking questions, all the folks there, like, if I can encourage you to do one thing is to always share information, because folks really have a hard time like accessing information. And not because they can't read, and not because they're not looking for it. It's because it's not put in a way that is comfortable for them to receive. And so again, like, you would know how to talk to your friends that is easy for them to receive, or if you speak a different language, or you have a different code or a different way of talking, like, we have to do whatever we can to kind of meet people where they are so that they would be more receptive to the resources out there. And also to make sure we do a better job as far as policymakers to make sure that the resources that we put out there that are allocated to different issue areas actually get to where they're supposed to be. I've seen too many times where we, allocate resources to a specific issue topic, and then by the time it reaches down to Sasha, who lives in Roxbury, if he gave out $10, it's like 25 cents, and it's like, whoa, that's not the intention of what those funds are for. So doing a better job of allocating resources is something that I'm definitely working on as well. The preventative and allocation of resources are two things that I like to focus on.
That's great. And Rep. Tyler, I really want to thank you too, because I think I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you remember this, but you were the keynote speaker at Generation Citizens Roxbury, first ever Roxbury Civics Day.
Yep.
And our students, like, were just so excited to see you, someone who looks like them and someone who is from the communities that they are, as they're trying to make change, be making those change and be navigating those systems and leading those systems so that they have better access to it. So honestly, without folks like you and Raul, who are at the forefront trying to make these changes happen, we wouldn't be able to have the next generation of young people, of young low-income people, of young POC people, who will then better be able to prepared to navigate those systems because they see folks like you who are leading that forefront and then want to lead as well because they can see that they can. They see someone like them and they see that, if you can do it, I can do it, and I'm here for it. So thank you so much for being that keynote and being that leader in the house. Thank you so much for your service.
Thank you, Ellie. Honestly, like when I first became a rep, or when I first jumped into this like whole political crazy machine of craziness, I was 26 years old and I didn't know anything about politics. I knew nothing about politics, but what I did know was that the rep that had served before me, he served for 31 years, which was at the time longer than I ever was alive at the time, and more importantly, she also, she moved on and she wanted to retire, and it was an open seat. And I saw so many different voids that needed to be filled, and I just wasn't going to sit wayside and just kind of just wait around for someone else to kind of fill those voids. So I jumped in and, I worked very hard, and, thankfully enough, I worked hard enough to get to where I am today. So again, if there are people out there that want to get involved, like, don't hesitate, when it comes to getting involved. And getting involved can be anything you want it to be. Just don't sit wayside, because you know how, like, when you talk to your friends and if someone says something and you're like, I was thinking that too. Like, that's pretty much what politics is all about. Like, other people have the same struggles as you have, but you got to be a leader and like really step up. And I'm quite sure Raul can, attest to this. I'm quite sure you have a very unique story as well. But like, you just got to get in there and just start advocating, because there's other people that are going to be like, hey, I was thinking that too. That's me all the time. So why not? That's what you're there for. So,
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, just being able to like step into the game. There's so many of us that I think for so long have been made to believe that that it can't be us in these positions making these decisions, and for so long we've just been become accustomed to, I think, voting for the I don't know, the best white guy out there that best speaks, again, policy over platitudes, but best speaks to our community. Although I come from a really low income poor community that has been that way for many years, and there's been so many people, and by the way, everybody elected there is all Democrats, right? And so many people that keep talking a good game, this idea about like, oh yeah, we're bringing resources in and stuff like that, but the essential, like the heart of it, the root of it doesn't change. And if you don't change what's at the root of these problems, then you could address some of the symptoms, but the problem's always going to be there. It's always going to come back. So what we're seeing right now are all the problems are being magnified or amplified in some way, but those problems are already there. Problems related to housing, problems related to child care, like the rep was talking about, issues related to transportation, and just generally the idea that, like, if you work a full-time job, like, you should be able to afford to live, make a good life for a family, maybe be able to own some property and stuff like that. And right now, there's so many of us that are barely able to afford our rent every month and whatever else we need to live and to raise kids for those that do that, and aren't building wealth, aren't building generational wealth that is actually gonna lead to something greater later on for those who come after us. And that those essential problems haven't changed; they've been magnified by this crisis. And we know who gets tossed to the side when layoffs need to be made, and you don't see a lot of vice presidents being laid off or furloughed or whatever, right? It's the folks that are at the bottom end of the economic ladder. But at the same time, what we see is how essential, like, everyday people are to the functioning of our society. How essential agricultural workers are, and grocery store workers, and people who drive trucks, and just like everyday people, and how essential they are. And yet, and still, we have a federal minimum wage that, it doesn't even get you above the poverty line.
Yeah.
And so those are the kinds of things that now as they're being highlighted, we need to keep fighting for those things to change. And for those of us that are in positions to vote and make those changes, we need to get it done.
Yeah. And it's funny what you said about that. Like, that's why I'm so empowered by people that like step up or kind of use their voice to kind of elevate the voices of the people that feel voiceless. And funny enough, that's how I met Sasha, right? She was working at a place. She moved on from that place, and then she came on to leading Mass Now. And she's like, I really, really, really want to advocate for these 3 causes. And then now look at like where Mass Now is now, doing so many amazing things. And so like, it's stories like yours that I, try to do everything I can to help, empower other people, to help elevate voices, because we are stronger together, to be totally honest. And like, I'll forever appreciate like Mass Now and what you guys are doing. I think it's amazing,
I mean, likewise, I am just like reminded every single time I do that. I mean, this is the second time, but I'm so thankful for you all being the echo chamber I need, and I think we all need to know that we are not alone in this fight. We know that housing is critical to public health. We know that everyone is important to public health. We know that by investing in women, we're investing in families, and we're investing in everyone, and that's our truth. And no one can take that away from us, even if we are the minority sometimes when we have this conversation. In this Facebook Live, we're not the minority, and that feels good. And I'm going to hold on to that power now for my whole weekend until next week. I see 2 questions that I want to relay to you both, or all 3 of you, from the audience that I will end with. One is, as electeds of color, how are you going to make sure the racial inequalities more fully exposed by the pandemic are continued after this is over? And relatedly, I think, are these housing resources still available during these times of COVID? So maybe closing thoughts on housing resources, and also both of your work, all of your works as elected representatives of communities of color.
Yeah, I'll start. So housing resources available, yes, they are. And a big part of, what some of the legislation that I talked about, I kind of brushed over because I can talk about that for years, is to be able to provide more funding for a lot of those housing resources. So absolutely, they are available. And I will share with Mass Now any other additional information I have, and hopefully you can share it to the folks that are here watching and that are tuned in. And for the second question, as far as what am I going to do to make sure that the racial inequities are fully exposed by the pandemic, something that I've really been working on a great deal, something that I kind of been really, really pushing for, is the consistency in data collection. So a lot of the times, like, when we come across issue topics, not even this pandemic, like I'll tell you a story about when I fought for trying to collect data for people who are racially profiled when they're driving on the road. Data collection can kind of tell us a lot about a story, and kind of also to lead us to an avenue where we're going to be fishing for solutions. And so making sure that we collect data, and not only just any data as far as your race, your gender, and all the other things that are very, very unique to each individual out there, because that's how we can begin to be able to be preventative about the issue topics that kind of arise. So data collection is super, super huge, and that is something I live and die by. We got to know the facts.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, because I think it's a conversation. I think about what Councilor Michelle Wu talks a lot about, is this need for impatient leadership. The idea that there needs to be more of an urgency in our work, and I feel that all the time where I am. And I know that there is, in terms of like racial equity, there is this need to sort of bring people over, to onboard them, to win over hearts and minds. And I'm good with that. Like that's part of the work that I do at BU. Literally, I teach a course called Diversity and Justice in Education, and every semester most of my students are white, and some of them looking to learn more about racial justice. But I think that that policy and practice often takes a back seat to hearts and minds, and that instead of I shouldn't have to wait for your understanding of my need to be free for me to be free. Right? For me to be free to walk out in the street and not have to worry about violence, whether it be from people in the community or from police officers, right? or the freedom for to walk around the evening at night or do whatever, right? Just freedom in general, right? Economic freedom, all these things. I shouldn't have to wait for somebody else to believe it for me to actually have it. And I think that all of this focus on hearts and minds, which again is important, but the sole focus on that and a lack of focus on actually changing policies is really problematic, and it makes people feel better about the work that they're doing because they're having climate surveys and they're doing racial equity audits and all that, which again is all important. But if you're not actually, the moment you have the opportunity, you're not changing policy so that it allows like folks of color to build wealth, to be able to live freely and live without fear of violence, and especially for women in that case, and trans-identified folks in that case. Like if we're not doing that, then none of the rest of it really matters. Like it's nice, it's platitudes, but it ain't else, right? And so I think that's the way we've got to start to flip the conversation, is to like add more of a sense of urgency. And the moment we have whatever it is, the number of votes that we need to actually change the thing that needs changing, we should do it at that moment and no later. We shouldn't wait till everybody gets it or everybody comes around. We should do it as soon as it is politically possible, and to do it. And so I just want to inject a little bit more impatience into what we're doing. And it's sad that what's happening right now because of COVID is finally awakening people to these racial disparities. And I remember when Congresswoman Presley and Senator Warren and others were saying, we need to look at this data by race. We need to be collecting this data by race. We said, you're making this whole thing political. And what did we see? As soon as the data came out, we saw exactly what we knew we were going to see.
Collection.
Right. Well, first of all, folks already collected it. Yeah. And then what we see when we do collect it is that communities of color, immigrant communities, right, low-income communities are being hit the hardest by this. And so it's essential that, for a lot of us, I'm sure to the rep right here, that's not a surprise.
Yeah.
And the fact that we live every day knowing that these things are the case, that homelessness is the problem that it is, that we still haven't figured out childcare, even though it's totally solvable. We need to have a lot more urgency in what we do. And so I hope to keep speaking up and speaking out and doing more, taking more opportunities like this to hang out with y'all, have a drink and talk about policy. I love it.
100%. Yeah, that's amazing. Y'all are amazing. The one thing I will add, as we're talking about resources, and it's not directly to housing resources, but my organization, Generation Citizen, just is doing a unit on Take Action for young people. So if you're a civics teacher, or if you're a parent trying to teach your young people at home how to take action and how to be civically engaged in their communities, there's some really great lessons in there, really great toolkits about how to reach out to your elected officials and ask them to push forward housing policy issues, push forward more funding for folks who are losing their jobs right now, making sure that folks aren't evicted and our health workers have the PPE they need. It all starts, it has to go to our young people. Our young people need to learn how to do that too, and need to know that they have a voice. And so I encourage, if anybody's looking for those resources, just go to generationscitizen.org, and we have those lessons there. But yeah, our young people need to know that they have a voice, and that it needs to come from them too, that they are able to advocate for these changes. And my hope for the end of this, whenever that happens, is that we learn many lessons and are investing in a lot of different changes in our system, and are pushing policies forward that are helpful to our communities that are most vulnerable right now. So thank you all for all of your work.
Thank you.
I can't say it enough. Thank you all so much for all the work that you're doing day in and day out. I feel incredibly blessed to have you grace our virtual stage and share your updates on what your work and your life is like during this pandemic. The conversation does not stop here, even though it is 5:11, so we should stop our webinar. But definitely become a member of Mass Now if you haven't already at massnow.org, because we are a movement building organization looking to convene all of this energy from this conversation into our multi-strategy agenda to both change hearts and minds, like Raul was saying, and then also advance feminist policy, which we know is not just going to reap rewards on feminists, but is really feminist policy for all of us during the pandemic and always. So thank you for joining us on our second episode of Feminist Friday Happy Hour. How do we know that it's Friday during our pandemic if we are not celebrating it on Facebook Live, as I am now compelled to do that I'm quarantined? And I want to give a shout out to our guests who are all confirmed for next week. So we will be doing this series indefinitely while we are quarantined. So next week, tune back in at the same time, Friday, 4 p.m., to hear from my co-host, Joe Trujillo, who works with me at Boston Pride. And then we will be having special guests from the Transgender Emergency Fund, Athena Vaughn and Chastity Bowick, who will be talking about what life is like both in quarantine and also at the convention center doing emergency response for our trans family. And then we'll also be hearing from Suffrage 100 MA, which we'll be hearing from Freddie Kay and Katrina Huff-Larmond, who are two members of the board of Suffrage 100 Massachusetts, and they are doing incredible work to raise awareness around the suffragists who fought for the vote 100 plus years ago, and also right now in our 100th anniversary, what does that mean to honor the suffragists' legacy? So tune back in next week for everyone watching. Like us, share us. Thank you all for joining. Thank you, Ellie, Raul, and Rep Tyler for appearing live today. And we will all continue talking soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.